So, Carl, supposing there's I don't know, let's say a young man, 20 years old, had to drop out of school as soon as he could because it was clear that he was not, academically inclined, maybe labeled as inattentive, unmotivated, not serious, if only he would try. And maybe he realized that he's good at doing things that may perhaps land him in jail. What would you say to this type of person? Because there are a lot of them out there. I mean, people who feel so discouraged. Do you think that Davis could help this type of person? And also, what would give you the authority to give this person hope?
Wow, a big question. I'm gonna again, it's gonna be a long answer, I think. But first of all, I think very often we would say young man gets into trouble, but there's a lot of dyslexic women that get into equally amount of trouble. They just manifest differently. So the real difference between men and women is that, from this point of view, from the Davis point of view, is that, and in society as well, men are more overt with their problem. So I mean, I just told teachers to F off, literally to their face, right? So by the time I got to about 13, 14, I just realized that it wasn't working and I gave up. So if you're on in that group, of which there's a lot, basically all of your F students, right? And this is gonna be somewhere between 15 and 20% society. It's actually a real problem for society and socially and economically and all of those things. The prisons are full of people that are on the learning disability spectrum. Full. They're probably, depending on the stats you look at and depending on how you want to discuss it, somewhere between 50 and 70% of the prison population.
Incredible.
So yeah, this is what I call the dark side of dyslexia, and I have yet to do a video on it because it's quite controversial. I'm trying to break it down so I can, but sort of give you a bit of a teaser, it is what I call the dark side of dyslexia, and there is a dark side to this learning disability route, and it's got everything to do with mental health and social, just what we're calling mental health issues, which is a nice label, but it doesn't really describe what's going on for people. It's got everything to do with the criminal justice system, everything to do with addiction, um, and it's a path that most parents are really quite terrified for their kids to go down, because it's a really slippery slope once you're on it, and it's every parent's worst nightmare. And even when you begin to talk about it, so many other opinions come in that to talk about it from the point of view of dyslexia and sort of leave everything else out, really hard to do. Really, really hard to do. So, but if you think about it from a different point of view, you'll get there. So if you go to school every day, 5 days a week, and you're asked to do something that you actually cannot do because it disorients you,
No
and you
matter
can,
how hard you try.
yeah, depending on how hard you try and how severe it is, you may be able to do some of it, depending on the day. Ron says the most consistent thing about dyslexia is its inconsistency. So one day you can read the word, well, the next second you can read the word, the next second you can't, right? And I've literally seen that in my clients all the time. So the symptoms vary from day to day, from week to week, from year to year. As you get older, the symptoms will vary as you progress and your brain changes. Some symptoms will die away, some symptoms will get more. And if you are exposed to doing something again and again and again and again and again that you either struggle to do or cannot do to a great or a lesser extent, you will begin to get a self-image about yourself. And that self-image will be, I can't, right? But you're in a position where you're essentially being forced to have to do it. You have to go to school. You have to learn to read. Learning to read is a very, very important skill. It's probably one of the most important skills in our society, literacy. And your income is based on your ability with literacy. Pretty much hand that's down. Okay, we all know that. We all understand that. If we think about it for more than about 5 minutes, we'll get there. However, if you're in a family that has always done badly, has never done well, has a history of dyslexia in your family, you're going to have generational dyslexia. It is an inherited condition. What we find is people slide more and more downhill. Um, so then you put all the problems of society on top of somebody who has a I can't, and why would they succeed? Okay. I mean, I've literally been told dumb, lazy, brain damaged, stupid. I've been physically and mentally had very, very inappropriate behavior, and that's just from the teachers. Okay. Within my own family, it happens. Some things were really good within my family, some kids were not. Also, dyslexic kids tend to gravitate to other dyslexic kids. If you are being bullied, if you are a victim, you usually will end up hanging out with other victims, or you will end up bullying yourself. So guess what happens? All the trouble kids end up in the same class, because we don't want a bunch of trouble kids in the grade A academic, because they're going to disrupt the class and hold the class back. So we don't put F students in with A students. We tend to separate them. This is why in Canada we have academic stream and applied stream. All the kids that are really good with academics, you're going to go that way. All the kids that are not, you're going to go this other way. Not to mask that, there is nothing wrong with being a carpenter. There is nothing dishonorable about being a chef or a janitor. In fact, actually, it's a very honorable job. But
I'm
nobody
just
really.
you made me think of Jamie Oliver, who is dyslexic and read his first book at 38 years old.
Yeah, right. He's classic dyslexic. He comes out about it. But he was lucky. He had a skill set. The gift side was he was very creative with food. He didn't listen to people. If you listen to him talk, he says, well, I had a difficult time in school. But he then had some other talents that probably encouraged, probably had some opportunities that came along, probably had a I'm not going to let this get me down kind of mentality. And who knows what happened around his life. I don't know his whole backstory.
But he is an outlier.
Yeah, he's not
He's so
the norm.
successful.
Yeah, yeah. When we hold up people who are very gifted in society, like Jamie Oliver, Richard Branson is one
Mhm.
people hold up. Um, in some ways, that's also actually a negative for dyslexic people, because we're holding, say, well, why aren't you a billionaire? Why aren't you a
Mhm.
personality? Well, that makes me feel worse about myself, not better.
Exactly.
Right? So it can have a double negative effect on a person. So we send kids to this environment, and it's not like I'm trashing school. It's that I'm 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 I struggle with being very positive about school. There's a lot of good things to do, good reasons to go to school. But if you don't know what's causing your basic problem and they don't have a solution that helps, then you're basically stuck. Okay. And the school system thinks it has a solution, but that solution actually makes a lot of kids worse, not better. But good luck trying to say that. There are some teachers that are on board and get it. There are some that don't. And we could talk about the school system in another question. But if you're coming back to your original question, if you're in that environment where you're trying and failing and trying and failing and trying and failing, it's pretty obvious which road you're going to go down. And how education tries to fix it is by politically correct language, trying to include everybody, not leave everybody behind, things like assistive technology. But if you're using a computer to learn to read, then you don't have the basic skill, and you're still reading 2 years below grade level. You know it, the teacher knows it, but we're all playing this living in denial game. And that happens a lot. And some kids will actually buy the fact. I've had kids come in to see me that I know are reading 2 or 3 years below their grade level. They believe that they're doing okay because they're the best in the special ed class. So they don't think they've got a problem. But
Mhm.
to me, it's like a red rag. I can obviously see it, and everyone around them can see it, but they're encouraged to sort of live in denial. Well, if you encourage people to live in denial and take medication to stop the symptoms, you are setting them up for a route of failure and denial and drug addiction that you don't even want to begin to discuss. Okay. And people are like, well, what are we supposed to do? Well, that's why I got involved in Davis. There is an alternative to that path. And that for me is Davis, because it's based on root cause and it's based on the way a person thinks. And it allows them to control their problem rather than control it with something else. It's not that I'm trashing those something else's. Might sound like I am, but
Mhm.
I get very frustrated with that route that everybody goes down. And essentially what it does to people is it turns people apathetic. And
And you
that's,
know all about that because
yeah.
you want to just give us a brief history of.
Oh, I've had friends that have committed suicide because of their learning problems. It wasn't the cause of them committing suicide, but it certainly helped push them over the edge because they were extremely disoriented. I know of at least two of about five people who I know have committed suicide, and mental health was an issue. And I look at those people, three of them were all on the disoriented spectrum, so it certainly didn't help. That's as severe as it can get. But I know countless people that just medicate with either food, alcohol, soft drugs, hard drugs. I've had friends that have been to prison because of it, because they just don't understand how the world works. They get so frustrated, so angry that boom, they just lash out. Before they know it, they've punched a police officer because they've had a little bit to drink, and then now they're down this criminal path. So it's really easy to go down that road. And if you drop out of school, if you start hanging with the wrong crowd who are also all dyslexic, and they're just pushing back on society who's telling them that they don't have any value. Okay, well, what's going to happen? They're just going to push back and say, get lost, right? And depending on that person, they're going to do it harder or less.
Their
But then what?
survival depends on it.
Yeah, I mean, if you are completely criticized all the time, endlessly, what happens is you have three basic things that you can do. You can fight, flight, or freeze. Okay, in school system, or fawn is the other word. You can fawn. The school system trains people to become, I think, apathetic because they don't have a solution. So you just eventually give up. And then, depending on your literacy level, you just go and get a job. There are lots of jobs that require F students, so you'll just go and do an F student job.
Or
You'll be a,
because, yeah, people pleasers as well.
yeah, you become, well, that's probably fawning. Okay. You can run away, you can flight. You can just run away and blame it on everybody else. It's not me, it's everybody else's problem. It's what a lot of parents do. They go, oh, the school system, and blame it on the school system. The teachers don't know what they're doing, whatever. That's running away from the problem. Or you can fight. And depending on how much you fight, you will have, the rules will get imposed. And if somebody gets really, really bad and really out of control, and then with the police get involved, laws get broken, and eventually you end up in prison. So it's a very long, slippery slope. And for some people, it's very short. And for some people, it's very long. And it really depends on, how, again, the person, how bad it is for that person. If you are in an upper class. I mean, I come from England, so there's a very death-defying class system. So if you're a very upper class, you go to a private school with lots of private resources. Even upper middle class, that might still have that good family, not a broken home, parents who are trying to relate to it well. Okay, maybe you're not going to be held back. But the same, I grew up in a middle class family, and because I could not, private schools wouldn't have me or couldn't do much with me. Then the general public school, they didn't want me because I didn't test well. So I ended up in a really tough school in one of the worst parts of the city I grew up in. And there was basically almost gang warfare on a daily basis. And I just slid downhill. And it got pretty ugly. And if I hadn't have been exposed to some very positive things when I was younger, that I remembered that I was sort of basically okay, basically sane. I'd been exposed to that. Which is another long story, but I probably would have ended up in prison or dead, realistically, because a lot of my friends did. And I look back on people that I know, the people that I knew for a short period, from about age 12, 13 to about age 19, I really fell off the rails. But when I left school at 16 and began to work, and I was working in construction, and luckily I came under a guy who was really nice to me, really good with me, basically wouldn't take any BS from me. He
And then
essentially carpenter, and but without doing the apprenticeship. I did an apprenticeship without getting the papers, and he trained me well, and he took me under my wing, and he wouldn't take any nonsense from me. If I was acting crafty dafty or stupid on purpose, he would come down on me very hard. But if I did a good job, he would praise me. And so I had a good, strong male there being very decent, very kind, and saying, you come in drunk because you're hungover on Monday morning and you're going to get a rollicking. So guess what? I wouldn't get drunk on the weekend. Right. Right. So that's the dark side. Is people don't want to talk about it because it does get very, very sad, very, very dark. I've worked with clients that if I hadn't worked with them, they'd be in juvenile detention. I think I've probably worked with some clients. If I hadn't worked with, they'd probably be dead. Um, and that's both boys and girls. Not that many, but enough to know that it gets really bad. And the problem is we have the audacity as societies to look back at these kids and say, "Oh, what went wrong?" And it's because I think it's one of the things that keeps me a Davis facilitator is I know that when we do Davis, it gives the kid an out from that life. The ones that are going down that road, they know they're going down that road, and they just give up into it. They just say, "Well, why would I can't do this other thing. I don't want to be a laborer for the rest of my life. I can make $500 a day selling drugs. Why would I not?" You know, it's a no-brainer. Everybody would do that in that situation, or a lot of people would do that in that situation. Okay, so yeah, that's the long the long
Beautiful.
answer.
Thank you.
That makes
Um,
sense.
and
But
how old?
I do think the Davis, you'd probably need to do more than one program. If you had somebody who was really severely disoriented, really getting in a lot of trouble, you'd probably even want to do concepts for life, some of the autism work with them, so they can really understand society and how it works and the rules that they're not understanding. Most kids who are getting into trouble, they don't understand the rules of cause and effect. That's why a lot of ADHD people end up on the dark side, because they don't understand that there is a cause to everything and and an effect. Because we're disoriented, we don't understand that. So that's what the Davis programs allow us to do.
But is it always obvious, even to their, let's say, their parents or the people who know them best,
That what sorry is what always
that
obvious.
this whole cause and effect, this lack
Yeah,
of?
one of the big complaints from parents is that kids who are ADHD, generally speaking, is that they're socially inappropriate behavior, or they're not getting executive functions. So they're not understanding order versus disorder. They're not understanding sequencing. They're not understanding not to be grabby. They're socially inappropriate behavior. The things that you've sort of said you've seen with your son, sorry, that we talked about, that he's not getting how the world works. He's not fitting nicely. That is could get more and more severe depending on the person until they just then it's not that they're fitting, they're butting heads. It happens with all kids at a certain point, right? All kids don't get how the world works. That's what parenting is about, teaching them the boundaries. But when we're disoriented, we don't understand those things and it gets worse and worse and worse.
But Carl, you're obviously a very eloquent, intelligent man. Were you able, before you did Davis, were you able to express yourself as clearly then as you can now?
No, no.
Okay.
If I had this conversation still has elements of me being a bit dyslexic. And that means I sort of go round in a big circle and come back. Okay. Because it's a big topic. So I tend to talk a lot, right? Which is my old habit of talk. I can talk too much sometimes. So that can still happen. But also I can go off on a tangent, which is a very ADHD thing to do, and can't bring myself back. But now I can bring myself back and talk and bring it back full circle, which I couldn't do before.
But some
So
of my favorite speakers, let's say on YouTube, they often go on a tangent, but yeah, they will nail the original question. But that's what I love about it, this tangential thinking.
right, so that's the big picture thinking, trying to explain all of it in one nutshell. That's why a lot of my videos are quite long. It's a complicated subject, and I try to touch on as much as I can, rather than a lineal thinking person will just hit the top 5 points within 2 minutes and they're done. Where we tend to talk about the bigger picture and everything involved, and then come back and answer the question. That's what I couldn't do, and
How
that's
old were you when you did Davis?
I was about 40 years old. I'm now 54. So that would be me doing my program at the end of 2008. I then trained through 2009, and then I became a facilitator in 2010. And I've done a lot of work on this whole side of my life, because I realized I didn't fit in a lot of different ways. And I completely failed school. I was what they call a high school dropout. I left at 16. English system is a bit different from the Canadian system, so I was held back a year. So I was 16 years old when I was hanging out with 15-year-olds because they'd helped me back. So that's a bit rude and insulting and lowers your self-esteem. But I knew it was because I couldn't read, but I had no diagnosis, none at all. I didn't get diagnosed until much later in life. But that might be a different question. I don't know. But I'm wandering off our topic. But basically, I had an okay start from sort of zero to. Well, I had some birth problems, but which people like to sort of claim is dyslexia, but it affects your dyslexia, but it's not what causes it. And then really from sort of 0 to 8 or 9 were kind of okay, like most families probably. There was a divorce in the middle of it, so that upset things because that is emotional, that creates confusion. The confusion triggers disorientation. So that is when I began to spin out, I think. And also, but I couldn't read my own name when I was 8 years old. And I couldn't write my own name when I was, I think, 10. I think a teacher told my mother when I was about 10, oh, I think your son's dyslexic because he can't read and write his own name. And my name's 4 letters in it. And I couldn't do that at 9 or 10. So my mother realized it and tried to do things, but she tried to get me diagnosed, but we didn't even do the diagnosis.
You had a very supportive mother.
She tried very hard, given the circumstances that we're talking 45 years ago. The type of help that's out there doesn't exist what it does now, but the help that's out there now still isn't very good. I don't think it hasn't really changed that much. It's just what we've got good at diagnosing.
Hi, I do hope you enjoyed that video. If you would like to find the nearest Davis facilitator to you, you need to go to the links below. They'll be listed in the description somewhere, depending on which channel you're watching this on. If you want to find the nearest Davis facilitator to you, I suggest you go there and just follow the links. If you're interested in training as a Davis facilitator, then again, just go to the links below. You'll find training there. Or if you're looking for a program for yourself, you can also go to those links. My suggestion, if you are really interested in Davis, the best thing to do is to pick up the phone and start talking to a Davis facilitator closest to you, because they will be able to answer all of your questions. That's it for now. See you in the next video.